Hey guys, Brian from Boas here. Lately I've seen a lot of reptile sellers on social media complaining about tire kickers. But what exactly is a tire kicker when it comes to a potential reptile buyer? What do I think of tire kickers and how do I deal with tire kickers? Those are some of the topics I'm going to discuss today. So whether you're buying or selling reptiles or just interested in the reptile market in general, be sure to stay tuned. The tire kicker metaphor, of course, comes from auto sales, where people have this idea of someone would go onto a car lot and they'd be talking to the car dealer, and rather than actually buy the car, they just want to kick the tires, so to speak, BS about the car, talk cars and everything related to cars. And when your job as a professional is to sell cars, you want to sell as many as quickly as possible. So if you have to spend hours and hours talking to somebody that's not actually going to buy a car, obviously you're probably not going to think that highly of the whole interaction. And that's this deal with reptiles. When people sell, they often encounter some people that aren't really as serious about buying reptiles, or maybe they just don't quite know. Of course, snakes don't have tires, so I don't think it's really appropriate to call these people tire kickers. So I'm going to refer to them as snake strokers. So basically, they just want to stroke your snake without actually providing it a new home. And there are quite a few of these types of people on social media and, in general, that you'll probably have to interact with. And they probably have multiple different reasons for doing this type of behavior. It's not all going to be malevolent, of course. So some people they just don't really know whether your snake is the type of snake that they want, and they just want more information. Maybe they're not sure about the care requirements and want to bounce the ideas off you before buying the snake. Maybe they're just doing it because they want attention and they like talking snakes. So it could fall into any of these categories. But these are all people that I would refer to as a snake stroker. And I'll say that in my experience with dealing with people that buy snakes, there's really three broad categories. And roughly 1/3 of buyers fall into each of these categories. And the first are people that know exactly what they want. They see your snake, they understand it's a good deal, and they just jump on it. They have very few questions. They email you or contact you, tell you they want to buy the snake, and then they arrange your payment and shipping. It's really fast. Most of these people have kept snakes before, and they don't really have a lot of questions. They're familiar with husbandry. These are really good people to get your snakes new homes with, and chances are good that they might breed them as well and contribute new generations of the snakes to the hobby. So this is, again, about 1/3 of the people that I interact with. The next are people that they're not really completely sure, and maybe they're beginners, or maybe they have limited snake keeping experience, or maybe they just have questions about your snake and they want to know as much information as they can, which is, of course, always a good thing, which I would encourage you to get from any snake seller. And so you will have to answer some questions and give them some information. But usually these types of people end up buying the snake, or sometimes they might not be able to buy a snake immediately, but in the future they do. So interacting with these people, even though it might take some of your time, is by no means a waste of time. And I would encourage you to interact with these people, give them the information that they request if you're selling snakes, because it's in everyone's best interest to have lots of snake information out there when you sell your snake. And I'd say about 1/3 of people fall into this category, including a lot of these people end up being repeat customers, especially if you give them the good customer service. So, make a note of that. And then the last third are what I would call the real snake strokers. These are just people that maybe they just want attention. They like emailing people, they like getting information. Maybe they think that they can pick your brain for information and they want you to comment on their setup and all this other stuff. And I like giving information like this. I don't really have any secrets to hide. I want everyone to have as much information as possible. Sometimes I just get these ridiculous open-ended questions like, what is the best snake for me? Can you review all the snakes? Or what do you think of my setup? How do I breed snakes? Things like that. And I've done many videos on these topics, so I usually just refer to people to the videos. But in my experience, these are people that typically they don't end up buying a snake. You might email them numerous times. They'll often come up with some lame excuse after you've interacted with them for days or even weeks in some cases. Sometimes they say that they're going to buy the snake and then they just up and disappear and you don't hear from them again. But this is pretty typical that you're going to encounter people like this, and I wouldn't really let it get to you personally or, really think too much of it. It's just part of selling the snakes. So in general, I don't mind these types of people. I just know that it's part of the territory. If you're going to be selling reptiles, you're going to have to deal with customer service, and you're going to have to deal with some people that sometimes don't treat you maybe the way that you would want to be treated or the way that you would treat a reptile seller. But it's just part of the whole process. You will also encounter lots of great people that will provide, outstanding homes for your snakes, and that really will give them great homes, and a lot of them will become your friends, and a lot of them you'll have really positive interactions with. So you have to look at that too. Before I forget, I thought I'd show you this beautiful snake, that one of my favorites to get out and stroke. This is my Branchia Columbia female, and this girl is now almost 4 years old. Beautiful animal produced by Michael Beach. This one has this beautiful strawberry looking red and pink coloration. I just love the looks of this female. As I mentioned, I don't mind the tire kickers, and I try to answer everyone's questions as long as I have the bandwidth. Typically for a question that's just really open-ended, I'm not going to waste more than maybe a minute answering that. So I always refer people to my videos. Typically I don't talk to people on the phone either, unless there's someone I know or it's somebody that seems like they're a serious customer. But a lot of times people just reach out to me, hey Brian, do you have a minute? I want to pick your brain about this aspect of boa keeping. Sorry guys, I just don't have the time for that. As much as great as you might be, that's why I make these videos. So as far as my procedures, I set my policies as straightforward as possible. I make everything completely clear in my terms of sale, which you can read by going to the link below the video description. And I don't really negotiate on prices either. So I think a lot of these tire kicker types, they want to try to negotiate and get the price down. Even if you set the price ridiculously low, they want to get it lower just because it makes them feel good. But I don't do that, okay? So I'm not going to set my prices lower. Typically they're not negotiable. This is how I roll. I know there are sellers out there that I think they set their prices deliberately sky high, and they figure people are going to try to lowball them, and then they'll negotiate and meet in the middle. But I just don't have times for games like that. So I think that if you want to avoid these tire kicker types, just set your prices fairly based on the market, communicate very clearly what your sales policies are, and then hopefully you don't have to deal with any of these types of tire kickers. But although I would recommend that you try to answer people's questions, I would also not recommend that you spend an inordinate amount of time trying to satisfy every request from a tire kicker. Often they'll want more and more photos. You may have provided 3 or 4 photos of the boa, photos of the parents, and they want to see like a close-up of its belly scales, or they want to see a close-up of its left eye, or just these ridiculous requests. And I've always tell people, the photo of the snake is not the same thing. You can get a pretty good idea of what the snake will be like by looking at the photo, but unless you have the snake in the flesh in your hands, it's just not the same thing. So don't put too much stock in photos, and don't be taking more and more photos to try to meet these people's demands, because ultimately most of them will not be happy anyway. So just my thoughts on the tire kickers or snake strokers. If you're just getting into the reptile breeding endeavor, and maybe you're setting up your breeding pairs now and you're planning on breeding in a few years from now, it's definitely a good idea to think about your sales policy right now. And I think a lot of people, when they're getting into breeding reptiles, they put too much emphasis in the actual breeding and getting the babies, and then they have this idea that once they have the babies, the rest of it is going to be a piece of cake. And unfortunately, it's really not like that at all. You really have to put a lot into customer service. And I try to err on the side of too much customer service, when people ask me questions, I almost always try to answer them as best I can. I don't typically not respond to emails, things like that. I've seen some sellers that they don't really put much, if any, into customer service. I've had sellers in the past that would respond to my emails with one-word emails. I didn't even really know what their name was. Honestly, I've dealt with some people on the classifieds online that seem a little bit sketchy. Luckily, everything worked out great. I never got scammed or anything like that, but and sometimes I kind of had my doubts about a certain person. But my advice to you would be to give people lots of customer service, really make them feel positive about a transaction so that they can not think that they're getting ripped off, and they can feel confident about their purchase. And also, you'll find that word of mouth is very important in this industry, and if you give people good customer service, typically they'll tell their friends as well. And I just want to end by saying, if you're a reptile buyer, think about the seller, that all of the things that they have to do. Most of the sellers are not professionals, and we're just doing this as a hobby in our spare time because we love these animals. So, the time we can spend taking hundreds of photos and responding to your many, many requests could also be going into caring for our animals and, doing other things like spending time with our family or other obligations that we have. So please be respectful about people's time when you make requests for more and more information about a particular boa. So that's a little bit about my thoughts on tire kickers, or snake strokers as I might call them. If you have any experiences in this area, I'd love to hear them, so please write them below. And also tell me what you think about interacting with reptile sellers and what your experience has been, or if you're a reptile seller, some of your horror stories about some of the buyers you've interacted with, or sellers you've had horror stories about. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video and it was somewhat thought-provoking. As always, shoot me any questions or comments you might have. Thanks for watching, and enjoy your boas.